I had fought the worst of all wars and witnessed the redemption of evil. I have seen balance restored to the Force. But order can turn to chaos, as it did when I was born. Now, with my loved ones and my loyal allies, I face a new challenge unlike any before. And I'm not sure at this time we can win.
Star Wars Vector Prime by R.A. Salvatore, the first novel of the new Jedi Order.
You're watching Star Wars Day with Bobs.
When Luke Skywalker was most vulnerable.
This is a dangerous time for you. It is you and your abilities the Emperor wants.
When a renegade hero became a friend in desperate need. And a dark villain faced his greatest challenge.
Join me, and together we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
When the Empire turned more and more to the forces of the underworld.
Bounty hunters. We don't need that scum.
The underworld moved in to crush the Empire and the Rebellion in a single stroke. After The Empire Strikes Back and before Return of the Jedi, there was a time when heroes and villains alike lived in the shadows of the Empire.
All right, folks, welcome to Star Wars Day. Hopefully you're having a blast with some of the different things that are coming up that you've been enjoying, that kind of thing. And with me, Stone Loki is in the house. We could talk about the EU, because the EU is one of those things that a lot of people love and they spent time there. Maybe they don't know exactly how to dive into it. Briefly, we'll go from the beginning, kind of touch on some different things that we recommend. But thank you for this, my brother.
Oh, thank you for having me. I love this topic because this is really my bread and butter. This is where I really dove into Star Wars even before the prequels came out. There were these books, man. There were these books and these adventures and this stuff that continued the story. I mean, this is what we wanted. This is what we wanted to see. We wanted more of these great people and these great characters in this great story. And we got some. We got some great stuff. We got some not so great stuff. We got some mediocre stuff. But it always felt like it was building. Like it was all building up. And you'd catch these little things in the book. Like, why did the Emperor build the Death Star? What was the point? What was the point of the Emperor taking over everything? Was there a point? And we learn eventually, yeah, these aliens were going to invade. And the only way he saw a future for the galaxy was this united front of battle stations, stormtroopers, this army that was going to continue his reign for all time, because he wasn't going to die. He was going to live forever. There's all these cool little things that were building up to this point, and eventually we got it with something called the Yuzon Bong War, which was, oh God, it was like, how many books was there? You had, let's see, what did you have? You had Vector Prime, you had Dark Tide 1 and 2, Agents of Chaos 1 and 2. That's 5 books. Balance Point 6, Edge of Victory 1, Edge of Victory 2. That's 8. Star by Star, Dark Journey. That's 10. The Apprentice, Enemy Lines 1 and 2, Traitor, Destiny's Way, Force Heretic 1 and 2, Force Heretic 3, The Final Prophecy, Unifying Force. And then it goes on even more, and there's stuff that was there to set it up, like Rogue Planet, Outbound Flight, Visions of the Future, Visions of the Past, which is more Timothy Zahn. Those 3, Outbound Flight and Visions of the Future, both of those are absolutely wonderful. Dark Nest, the Dark Nest trilogy. Those are great. It was like this giant story that was building to this crescendo. And even after that, you had the Unifying Force. You had the Return of the Jedi Order. You've got all this stuff that's just, take you forever to read through all this stuff. And some of us did multiple times. We read through all
Well,
this.
let me
cool
let me
stuff.
let me jump in. Let's get to the beginning because I remember the beginning very vividly, and this will probably be a theme that comes up at times during the course of the day, and that is that Jedi ended, and there's a couple years there of the lag time of the impact of Jedi being re-releasers, the toys, the merch, all of that. But then it took about five. It took 5 years, about 4 or 5 years, or so, 85, 86 when it kind of rolled out, but 91's the big year because 91 we had the two big things that happened that kind of changed the game. Timothy Zahn releases the first book, and Dark Horse publishes the first comic book. And suddenly, I'll tell you this, that it was such a big deal for me. I've never stood in line or bought a book on day one before, and now suddenly I was in that category of people. I never had that happen before, and I'm not really going to say I've had that really happen much before or since then. Suddenly, I had the novel, and then and they're not exactly related or anything like that. It's just like you said, it's like this expansion of things. When you started to get into this arena of things, were you able to kind of start at that beginning, like that, like by release date, or how did you kind of get into this love of the EU the way you did?
I had already gotten some of the books. Honestly, it all starts with the library. It's a little library that's still there. Believe it or not, the library is still there. It's in Deer Park, Texas. Little library in Deer Park, Texas. And that's where it all started. Was I saw these Star Wars books, and I was 8 or 9 years old, and I picked up a couple, and then later I would get audiobooks and try and find unabridged audiobooks. I kept realizing that every time I got an audiobook, it was missing things. And I didn't understand at the time, because I'm a kid, why it's missing. Why is it missing whole stuff in the book? Like a whole storyline's just gone because it's an abridged version of the book, and you don't get that. So I got really lucky. I got into it when I was a kid, and when I got a little older, when I was a teenager, me and my dad were bumping heads real big, and he read through the Thrawn trilogy just so he could talk to me about it. And because I kept mentioning this great trilogy, this great Star Wars trilogy that should be what's next. And he read through it, and he loves Zahn. He got more of his books. He got, books that didn't even have to do anything about Star Wars. And he was like, he knows his tactics. He's a tactician. There's a reason why he writes these books so well. Yeah, there you go. And those three books, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. Bringing Mara Jade in was absolutely awesome. Introducing her, and there was some stuff that conflicted in the beginning. There were Star Wars books that would conflict each other. There was conflicting information, and I think it was around this time that George was like, okay, you guys really need to get all your stories and all your ducks in a row. That way you don't write over each other. And Lucas started doing this thing where it's like, okay, well, if you want to write about this, you just can't conflict with what this person's doing. And when they started that, they made that canon. They're like, okay, this is what happens after. And all of this is canon. So if you're reading these books, that we have gone through the trouble of making sure everyone's ducks are in a row, everything is aligned. This is what happens after Return of the Jedi. We got really, really lucky with that. And then they did the exact same thing with the prequels. Once the prequel movies came out, they started writing books about what happened after Phantom Menace, how Anakin grew to be Obi-Wan's apprentice, and how Obi-Wan started treating him more of like an equal and a brother instead of just a Padawan, and what problems that presented. It was a great time to be into Star Wars books. We kept Star Wars alive with the comics, with the books, with the games. When there was nothing out there and no one was buying this stuff, we were the ones keeping them going, and they knew that. And George knew that. And that's why he loved letting them do the book series and keep writing, keep everything together. That way this person can't kill off this character or they can't do that without the nod and approval of everybody going into something. You can't just kill, like Timothy Zahn creates Mara Jade. They couldn't just kill Mara Jade without Zahn going, you know what? It sounds great. Go ahead and do it. They couldn't kill off Han or Chewie or one of these great characters without, everybody kind of coming together and going, no, this will work. This will really work. So let's do it. And that's the way it should be. It keeps them from just, oh, well, Chewie died in this book, but oh, he's back in this book. Oh, Han sacrificed himself destroying the third Death Star or whatever. And oh, but he's back in this book. It keeps everything nice and neat and working, and keeps people working together to create this much bigger story. And that really hit later.
And it really, I mean, obviously this is not new. This is a continuation of kind of like how things operated, particularly in the comic book world. We've heard many creators now, especially like Graham Nolan and Chuck Dixon, talk about, run the bat titles the way they were. They had their framework of what they were allowed to do. You kind of had free reign within a certain framework of what the character was, how certain things were defined. And with the Star Wars, what they did was they had these books, and obviously the Timothy Zahn book comes out in 91. It was such a massive success. They immediately rushed probably other scripts to production, because you ended up having a lot of other the other books for like, what's his name? Paul. He did like Glove of Darth Vader and stuff like that, right? So Paul Davids. So Paul Davids does these other books. There's like a couple of those books that come out, and by the time you get to book 2 and book 3, now you suddenly have several books. So now you have 6 other books or so. You start getting into like, the Jabba the Hutt stuff. You get into with Han and Leia. You tons of other stuff. So by the time we're rolling, like you mentioned the video games, but also what's happening this time too. 93 was the first year. We had the trading cards come out. Now you start to look at, oh man, this is like a business. Like this is Lucasfilm is figuring out this thing actually has some legs to grow and continue to engage the fans. And how was it for you? I mean, obviously you talked about your youth and all that kind of thing, but because there's so many books. I mean, we mentioned the original Zahn trilogy and things like that. How do you fence in for people? Like, kind of, what are some of the things that you would say to, like, okay, why don't you start with this book, start with this story, go to this story, a couple of benchmarks, if we would, so we can kind of pin that in for people, because there's just so many.
It's definitely start with the Throne trilogy. It's always start with the Throne trilogy, and it's really interesting what you said when you said, we're good behind the scenes. Getting a chance to talk to him, and I got a real good chance to do like a little interview over at Midnight's Edge with Timothy Zahn. Andre and Tom were so gracious to have me on and let me ask him a couple of questions. They knew they had something, and they knew that they were going to come at it hard and heavy. And when they were looking for writers, he had sent them like an idea of what he wanted to do with Heir to the Empire, and they said, we want 3 books from you, and we're possibly open to doing more, but we want these 3 books from you. We want to go with your idea. And they jumped on that. They knew they were making something special before they ever gave it to us. They knew what they were doing, and the whole point of it was, we want these great stories about the original 3. We want these great stories about Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo, and we're going to start there first. And if we'll expand into, maybe we'll have a Chewbacca book, maybe we'll have a Rebel book, but we're going to start with the 3 greatest Star Wars characters of all, and we'll move from there. And they did it, man. They did it. Heir to the Empire knocked it out of the park. If you're going to start anywhere, start there. There are books before Heir to the Empire. Do not get me wrong. There's some and I can hear a couple of people right now, Smuggler's Cantina, man. We want Bounty Hunter Wars and all of that good stuff. There's some great books out there before you get to the trilogy, but that one will get you in and keep you reading because you want more. These great characters that are in here. You want more of Captain Paleon. You want more of Thrawn. You think that, oh, well, that's all at an end, but there's so much more after that concerning Thrawn. You want a backstory. You get this deep backstory in Outbound Flight, where you find out more about Thrawn and where he came from and why he was doing what he was doing, and all these setups to this giant war that you have no idea is coming, but all the groundwork's been laid out over the course of years and decades. They've been laying this groundwork of maybe the Emperor knew something that nobody else knew. And that's the reason. That's the reason for the Death Star, and that's the reason for the giant buildup. Yeah, he was a maniacal emperor, sure, and yeah, that's good enough. But what if there was something more behind it, and it was more about his, let's say, eternal soul being able to live forever, however long he wants, without being challenged? There's more than just I want power. There is I want immortality. And if I'm going to have immortality, I need an empire that's going to be behind me 100% and help keep me alive for the infinite time I'm going to be in this galaxy ruling everything. It's fascinating how much stuff's out there and what this giant story is that they made.
Yeah, because what was also happening to this was like, okay, each thing fed more success into another thing. Like you said, it's like, okay, what happens after Jedi? What happens with the three? How do they go out and search for more Jedi? Look at more like a formation of a new Jedi Order, a new Jedi Academy, those kinds of things. That starts moving. Then they also drop in, which I thought was just brilliant, and this went bonkers, and that was Shadows of the Empire. So when they dropped in Shadows of the Empire, which takes place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, they create new characters. They sell action figures, special trading cards. They kind of almost like used it as a setup or a litmus test, if you will, before they started in 95. That's when they dropped the first orange cards. Those are the Power of the Force action figures, right? In 95. Now it's full on gas fire, right? Because you have, I mean, how many books are there? I pulled up the list by year. 3, 6, 9. There's 11 books in 95. 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 in 96. So I mean, we're talking about and there's 97's way more than that. So you're talking about in the course of like 3 years, they drop upwards of like, 35 to 40 books. They're dropping 2 or 3 action figure lines. Obviously, the comic books have branched into different things because they have that novel, right? The Rogue Squadron novel, right? But they do comic books on that.
Books.
Heir to the Empire comic books, right? So each thing is partying off another. So novels, comics, it's just like this whole balloon just keeps expanding. So for folks that are not familiar with expanded universe, because you hear nerds like us about animosity towards the loss of the EU, or these different, and it's similar to the way I think many people that felt the comic book stuff. It's like you're skipping stories that were so good, and what you're delivering isn't living up to that. And I'm not going down the rabbit hole of negativity. What I'm saying is, don't let yourself get consumed by things that are subpar. You can pick and choose EU stories. You can pick and choose EU content to give you some fun stuff to enjoy these characters, enjoy the journey. So
That's right.
Yeah. Because I'm not this. That's what's birthed off today. For any of you who haven't caught today, part of what for me was motivated was they don't get to own my fandom, right? It's like I don't have to be responsive to them telling me I have an issue because I don't like what they're doing. I can enjoy the stuff that's out there, and there's more stuff out there than I can even consume. There's so much stuff out there. I can pick and choose. I do not have to participate with all the negativity and all that stuff, right?
It's
let's
really funny
Go ahead.
that the old guard,
Mhm.
like you and I, are the ones that are sitting here saying, you know what, it doesn't matter whether you celebrate this on May the 4th or May 25th. It's just a celebration of Star Wars. Whereas the current regime is telling you, no, it's not the 25th. How dare you? You have to celebrate on May the 4th. Or the opposite the opposite. Oh, what's the 25th? You can't if you celebrate on the 4th, you're a shill or you're a Lucasfilmite or you're a blah 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 blah. It seems interesting that the older guard that's been around the longest are the ones that'll tell you celebrate whenever you want to. It's the celebration. It's the celebration and the coming together of people and the us talking about stuff like this, like the EU and comics and games. That's what matters,
Sure.
not any of this other crap.
Yeah, I mean, I've made my pitch about why the 25th to me matters more. It's like we usually celebrate when something begins. We celebrate an origin day, which is like the 25th, whereas May the 4th wasn't really a thing at all. Definitely not to the even time we're talking about. And it seems to me like it's evolving more so now, very rapidly, into only being utilized not as a day where we're relishing, we're cherishing this long history of this massive IP, but we're only using it as a day to have sales. It's almost like it's become a Black Friday for Star Wars stuff. And I'm like, I don't think that's what Star Wars Day should be. It can be a day that we have as May the 4th, Revenge of the 5th, Revenge of the 6th. I don't care. I think the important thing is that you also take pause and find the things that you enjoyed, hopefully find something else that you didn't know about that you want to explore and enjoy and that kind of thing moving forward. And if that happens to be some of the newer, then that's up to you. And we should all be allowed to agree to disagree and have fun nerdy talks talking about what one thing is better than another. I am not going to get caught to a bunch of the losing friends or whatever over stuff. That's just, to me, that's just
agreed.
Silly.
Agreed. No,
it's completely insane. We can agree to disagree. So what's another sort of like mini series by name that we could point people to? Like, so obviously the Heir of the Empire Thrawn trilogy is the most famous one. There's others, but what's the ones that you would like hang your hat on and tell, all right folks, here's one that I think is just, it's superior?
It's more than a trilogy, and it's what I mentioned earlier, and that's the Yuzong Vong War. There are 19 books. 19 books plus a few extras. They're almost all the 19, the prime 19 are all in chronological order. The other ones are like little setup books, so you've got it's heavily implied what's coming in this war. This is what Palpatine was afraid of. You have these beings from a different galaxy that are immune to the Force. The Force does not affect them. Can you force push them and do things like that? Yes, you can. But reading their minds, telling them what to do, affecting the cellular parts of their body. There's things that they learned how to use the Force for. You can't do it. They're immune to it. And they are some nasty pieces of work. You got the wiki pulled up.
Yeah, I was trying to look for some stuff here, folks, and I will try to make sure I put these links in the description. I will be in chat for this premiere, so if I'm missing something, I will drop it in during the chat so you can definitely see this. Just go through the history here, find out something if this is for you or not. But what I loved about this, and I got to be honest, I'm pretty ignorant to this. I was really, so you've made my day because it's something that I don't know much about. I've heard of it, but there's no way you would have told me there's 19 chapters in this sequence.
Yeah.
I just was blown away, like, whoa, because that is really unheard of. Number one, that you can get people to get along for that period of time, create that much content. Like usually even like in comic book runs, you'll have artists and writers come and go, those kinds of things. So yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just not common to have that kind of success over such a long period of time. So it says chronological reading order would be Vector Prime, Dark Tide 1 and 2, Agents of Chaos, Balance Point. Oh, see, I've read some of these. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure you have.
I have read, yeah. I mean, I've read Dark Tide 1 and 2. I've read Balance Point. I mean, I still have Balance Point, I think. Yeah, because Kathy Tyers wrote that. Yeah. So anyway, so my point is this, listen, folks. Oh, well, here we go. Now we have a breakdown. Is it still up? Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, it's still up. It's just really small. Let me see if I can just make it bigger just for the sake of.
There you go.
Get rid of that. Yeah, Vector Prime, Dark Tide 1 and 2. It's Onslaught and Ruin, Agents of Chaos, Balance Point, Edge of Victory, Conquest, A Mystery of Void, which they didn't put in bold because they suck. Edge of Victory, Star by Star, Arc Journey. So it just keeps going. It's beautiful. So look at that, guys. And I have to be honest, some of this stuff is probably economical. I don't have a hard time finding novels at a reasonable price.
There are a
mean,
few
the original
hardbacks. If you're like a hardback guy, first editions, I've got two. One of them is Bloodlines. It's got Boba Fett on the front. That book in pristine, very fine condition, like a hardback, is, and that's from after those. This was printed after those. It's like $1,000 if you can find a really, really good copy. There's another one, which has the death of someone important in it. If you can get that in hardback, some of those first editions, and I don't know why, because I had them shipped. So as soon as I had all this pre-ordered back in the day, so as soon as a hardback came out, it was like immediately shipped. I immediately got it because I had it. It was like on pull list for me, and they just ship it to me. I don't do that anymore because there's just not enough that I'm like. And there was another Thrawn trilogy that came out that I went through the trouble of doing that with. But everything else is just, no, I'm not constantly getting these shipped to me every single month now.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where folks, if you can just find your entry point of where you could be interested, we'll transition now into like certain type of characters that you would say, oh man, this character, this is why there's no surprise this character has a massive, because I actually would hear more about because life got in the way. I really wasn't reading a lot of some of the newer stuff, and I say newer not about Disney owning it, just some of the more recent era type stuff. But I would hear from the kids, oh dad, this character, oh the Darth. I was like, oh okay, cool. So you can see how this stuff is done so well. That's why I have these massive followings of these characters that are not part of the original 6 films, right?
Right. No, and they do there's a whole story about stuff that comes before that. They've tried to copy that and call it the High Republic instead of the Old Republic. They've tried to do all this current day stuff using bits and pieces of all of this groundwork that was laid. This is why a lot of Star Wars fans get upset when they hear things like, well, there were no stories about any of this before they took over recently and took direction. And it's really funny to hear that when all this groundwork was laid and all these wonderful people came together. Like you said, that's insane. All these different writers. You've got R.A. Salvatore, Michael Stackpole. You've got James Luceno, Kathy Tyers, Troy Denning, Greg Keyes. You've got all of these writers coming together and writing this huge story. And it's like they're passing the baton to each other. And they do this for years, not just with the Yuzon Bong books. They do it with the next series and the series after that. They continue this run of the baton, passing the baton back and forth to each other to write these wonderful books. Dash Rendar, cool.
Dash Rendar, Shadows of the Empire. We're talking about him a minute ago, and obviously this had renewed life for my kids because of the N64 game. Why won't this close? Come on, ad.
Because it's Oil of Olay. I think you got to hit that. Oh. Yeah, there you go.
I might have got it eventually. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Dash Rendar, he had N64 love that came on after. So I'm like, oh yeah, Shadows of the Empire. I knew who that is. So I was a cool dad because I knew. Corn Horn. It's kind of the see. Yeah, I don't know much about him.
Almost all these people, like Corrin, is part of the Jedi High Council that Luke creates in these books.
Yeah. Bounty Hunter Durg. Yeah. Okay. Jackson. Oh boy. Well, Jackson's kind of controversial, folks. You had heard my rant and rave about the comic books. That was not one of my favorite things, but okay, fair enough. There's Captain Pelion.
And he started out in so he starts out in the Thrawn trilogy and eventually becomes the Grand Admiral of the remnant of the Empire, what's left of the Empire. And he's the one who comes to the table and says, it's time to stop. It's time to stop all this. This is our space. This is your space. We officially recognize you as the New Republic. It's time for the Empire and the Republic to stop fighting.
Yep. Valence. The comic book, it says Marvel's original character. I'm not familiar with that. Darth Revan.
Huge icon. Huge icon from Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one that everybody thought there were some like legit people reporting on this, like that he was going to be appearing, and that you thought, well, this is them trying to tap into that. And yeah, didn't happen. Jaster Mariel.
Okay, so Jaster Merrill used to be the Mandalore, the head of the Mandalorians. And Boba Fett eventually becomes, basically takes his place.
Very cool. Exar Kun.
Dark Jedi.
Tales of the Jedi. I say it right? I say it wrong? I don't know. I did. We're out of microzone, guys. That's why I had Loki here. Ram Koda. Force
Jedi
Unleashed.
Force Master that was in the Force Unleashed. He loses his sight when Starkiller, who's Vader's apprentice, takes his sight and eventually becomes Starkiller's kind of like mentor and Jedi Master.
Very cool characters. Very, very cool characters. So, folks, tons of stuff to get into, tons of stuff to kind of like check out for yourself and find a space that you can enjoy and that kind of thing. What is the one that you've read most recently, Loki? Yeah, one that you've gotten to. I know you're getting ready to move and some things in life or have changed for you. Is there one in particular that you had a chance to read maybe in the last couple of years?
The last, besides going over, because I went over the Jedi Academy trilogy, I went over Outbound Flight and Visions of the Future and Past. I got about halfway through the latest Thrawn trilogy, and it is difficult to say the least. Yes, Timothy Zahn is writing, and you've got these parts. The beginning of the book is absolutely fantastic. If Thrawn was abandoned on a planet and had to live like Rambo, and stormtroopers showed up, what do you think would happen? That's like the opening of the book, and the opening of the book's great. He absolutely decimates these guys and just embarrasses this Imperial commander. He gets taken before the Emperor. The Emperor's like, oh, I remember you. I remember you, because they had met once before, and brings him on and wants to send him through, fast track him through the Imperial Academy and get him a command as quickly as possible. And that's all fine, great, and dandy. It just, there's a lot of in there that you're just like, I want to get through this and get back to Thrawn. Okay, when am I going to get through this and I'm going to get back to Thrawn? Okay, I understand you guys are like retelling his origin story here, but let's get through this and get back to Thrawn. Why do you keep taking me for 2 chapters over here to this lady that I know nothing about, that I care nothing about on this planet that's absolutely pointless when I want to learn more about Thrawn? So that was my last experience with a new novel.
Yeah, I have to be honest. There were times even with some of the novels that we were mentioning from the 90s where I was like, oh, okay, can we get back to the main 3?
Kevin J. Anderson.
It's okay. It's just like it's a novel, right? So you're just going to have a lot of information. You're going to have a lot of stuff. And every now and again, you have these sort of like sequences that are playing out that you don't have a lot of investment in. And sometimes there are callbacks to it. So it did pay off later. But sometimes you're just kind of, you don't care too much. But you know what? You gotta go with it and have some fun. So that's great. That's great. That's so. What would be something besides a Thrawn trilogy? Let's just take that out of the equation. And the war, holy cow! I did not realize they were connected to make 19 chapters. So I might have to take that out of the equation as well. I was going to ask, are there something you think would be a great adaptation? Pops is now in charge. I get to make the decision. You're going to come in the room and you're going to pitch me on, let's do this for a live action project. And which one would be the ones you'd want to throw out there?
Definitely Dark Empire would be at the top of my list.
Mm-hmm.
No one's done it.
Okay.
No one's really done it. How are you going to get a young Luke Skywalker? Well, we're going to time travel and we're going to go back and we're going to get Mark Hamill when he's younger. That's just the way we're going to do it. If I could just do anything, if I could throw anything into the arena, that's what we're going to do. We're going to get a young Harrison Ford. We're going to get Carrie Fisher back. We're going to get Mark back, and we're going to do this fantasy project where we don't know. I mean, it would start out with Luke bringing a Star Destroyer down using the Force onto Coruscant.
Most amazing.
Imagine.
The most amazing sequence. I couldn't tell you, bro. Imagine me, 1991. I'm opening this up and I'm just like, I was shocked. I just couldn't believe this. He just like does this and this Star Destroyer. It's just like, I'm like, yeah. The dude that couldn't lift the X-Wing out of the bog in Empire is now bringing Star Destroyers down. And yeah, I have to admit that was, are you opposed to them doing recasting? Let's say I do that and you're like, yeah, but I'd have to recast. Like, I don't have a time travel machine. So, I've seen the face modifications of like Sebastian Stan as, Luke Skywalker and things. Is there a way to make it work?
They have to hold true with what was written. They can't.
Yeah. The story matters more than the casting.
Yes.
Right. As long as we're true to the characters and the story.
Yes. True to the characters, well, it has to be modernized for the current day. None of that. Just keep the characters the way they were. Keep the spirit behind the idea the way it was. Yes, you can do that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Stone Loki, my brother, it's been so cool doing this. It's been a blast having Star Wars Day. It's a blast with folks that are in our chat right now, hanging out and doing that kind of stuff with us. Blow it up with your comments, recommendations, thoughts, and things like that. And brother, thank you so much for doing this. Hopefully you have a wonderful Star Wars Day, and appreciate it, my friend.
Happy May the 25th to everybody, and thank you, Pops, for having me on.
Star Wars begun. The Clone War has. The Geonosis battle arena where you can control all the action. Jedi heroes fight off countless enemies with powerful Force action as the arena erupts in chaos.
Look!
Even the odds with the Republic gunship. The epic battle for the galaxy is in your hands. Star Wars vehicle and playset each sold separately. Figures not included. Some assembly required.
Okay, so after the summer, that I had first seen the first Star Wars, go back to school in September, and all the kids are, talking about Star Wars and everything. And at the time, there were no toys out yet, so we were running around with wiffle bats as lightsabers and so forth. So it was that Christmas that we were looking forward to the toys. And you got to remember now, this was in the days before there was an internet, before, we had ways of, finding out from the companies and from the community how things were being released, where they were going to be released, distribution models, stuff like that. We just have to keep going to the toy store, going to the department store and looking and hoping and waiting. So I completely missed out on that whole early bird thing. There's a lot of videos about that. They didn't have the toys out for Christmas. So parents were going and getting a little certificate, with the card thing and whatnot. And it'd be like, okay, this is what you're gonna get in a couple months, the action figures. So I didn't get those. So I also never had the telescoping lightsaber. But when they did finally hit the mainline toy stores, I guess it was like February after Christmas, I got those original 12, and Mom went through and helped me make sure I got one of each. So I got all of the original, was it 12 back of figures? And on the back, this was before they were taking like photographs and putting the other. It was like paintings of, because they had to get the cards put together as they were putting the toys into production. So they showed Luke Skywalker with the extending lightsaber, but none of the toys had those. So yeah, I was in on the toys right from the beginning. First vehicle was the Land Speeder. Then I got the X-Wing, and they came out big and fast. So, you kind of had to economize what you asked for. And the big, Hail Mary was that Death Star playset, which I did get the following Christmas. It was like a joint gift. My mom and my grandmother went in together on it because that thing was expensive. But yeah, that's where it started. And, I'm still tapping the vein to this day.
CBS Fox Video presents a collector's preview. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away,
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace before the dark times, before the Empire.
an adventure unlike anything on your planet.
Sure, Kipling?
An epic of heroes.
You're coming in too fast! Don't worry. She'll hold together. Jimmy, baby, hold together. I got him!
And villains.
Now I am the master.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
The story of a boy, a girl, and a galaxy.
The Force will be with you, always.
Star Wars, the saga begins. The adventure continues in The Empire Strikes Back.
Vader wants us all dead.
He doesn't want you at all. He's after somebody called Skywalker.
Luke, a saga of rebellion.
Echo Station 5-7. We're on our way.
And romance.
I hope you know what you're doing.
An epic of alien worlds.
The cave is collapsing.
This is no cave.
What?
And the climactic clash between good and evil.
There's no escape. Don't make me destroy you.
The Empire Strikes Back. The battle for freedom rages on in Return of the Jedi.
Fighters coming in.
Here we go again.
The shield is down.
The cunning of the enemy.
Soon the rebellion will be crushed and young Skywalker will be one of us.
Get alongside that one.
The courage of a rebel.
I am a Jedi.
Not yet. You must confront Vader.
The power of evil.
Is Darth Vader my father?
Return of the Jedi. May the trilogy be with you for the best price ever. Plus, From Star Wars to Jedi is also available at a new low price. This stunning documentary takes you deep into the fascinating world created for the Star Wars trilogy.
Action!
Immerse yourself in the mind of George Lucas.
Special effects are just a tool, a means of telling a story. A special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing.
From storyboard to creature creation, from character development to the puppeteers who gave them life.
Eventually, you actually take a real person and stick them into that character. And that real person brings with him or her an enormous package of reality. I mean, 3PO is just a hunk of plastic. And without Tony Daniels in there, it just isn't anything at all.
Join George Lucas and friends for a delightful look at From Star Wars to Jedi.
Hello in TV land.
Collect the complete Star Wars trilogy one by one in their attractive new packages or in this collectible gift pack. But don't stop there. From Star Wars to Jedi, the fascinating saga behind the saga will make your video library complete. They're unlike anything in our galaxy.